Good morning, everyone. You can hear me okay? Okay, so I won't shout like I'm thinking I need to do. First of all, thank you so very much for having me here this morning. Um, as mentioned earlier, I just released my first book. It came out a few days before Christmas, a project that I've been working on for years, so way long overdue. But I think the timing of it is just perfect. But in the last session, and I have to, because I'm forgetful here, I asked the question, how has race relations and equality changed, um, especially since the last decade, since we've had our first Black president of the United States? For me, that's a very important question and one that I do like to hear from people about because it was the origin of the book that I wrote, To Lead or Not to Lead. And the reason that came about was once upon a time, I was in the doctoral program. Through University of Phoenix, I did an online program with the emphasis being the organizational leadership. And my focus was on like the lack of minority representation, whether you're African American or whatever race, whether you're a woman, gender, and so forth. And so each year I would go to different places in the US for these week-long cohorts. And that my last one that I did before I decided to drop out the program, that's a whole other story. But when I went to the last one, I was at that stage of developing what I wanted my dissertation to be about. And at the time, I was working for the state of Michigan, where in Michigan, you do see quite a bit of minority representation in leadership roles, but you can tell there's a lot of stress. People were going on leaves, disappearing. I mean, it was an interesting pattern that I saw in different departments for the state of Michigan. So when I got to my cohort, we had to do this exercise where you present your dissertation topic in a circle of people. And then once you introduce it, you can't say a word. You let everyone say whatever feedback, whatever they want to say about it. You can't say nothing. So I, at that time, was considering introducing that I was going to focus on the lack of minority leadership working in the state of Michigan. One of my peers, a white male, after I introduced it, immediately said, well, we have a Black president of the United States, so that's not going to be relevant anymore. There isn't any racism or discrimination anymore. He looked at that, although that is progress that we had a Black president, but he looked at that as being enough progress. And so it took everything in me. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to say something. But luckily, the rest of my peers, all races, genders, they spoke up. They tried to educate him, to let him know that, hey, yeah, this is progress, but we still have a lot of more work and change and everything that we need to do. And it was then that I came up with the idea that maybe I should do a comparison of how things have progressed during Obama's two terms. At that time, I believe he was ending his first term and we were going into a second one with him. So that was how I got into doing the research, interviewing people, everything that was going to be my dissertation. When I dropped out of the program, I had all this work and I was like, it's relevant work and information, but how can I really do this? I'm not going to be a doctor in this. Will people look at what I did as being valid, so on and so forth? I finally came upon a publisher, which I ended up not working with her, but she put the idea in my mind to take out a lot of the academic information, make it a nonfiction book, something that can inspire, educate, and just kind of make people aware of the situations and what minorities do go through when they are in leadership, how it can affect future generations from wanting to go into leadership if they're seeing how it can be for other people. And I know for me, working under minority leadership and seeing the stress that came with it, which would then weigh on us on the team, I was like, I don't ever want to be in the position that they're in. So, but we don't want that for our generation of leaders who can actually lead and do something. So I was like, well, that's what I'll do. And that's why I say it's been years. This started like maybe back over 10 years ago, me picking it back up, putting it down, picking it back up, putting it down. Finally, about a year and a half ago, I made the necessary changes that I needed to make. I had parted ways with that publisher, but then my idea was that, well, maybe I'll self-publish, but I found another publisher just in time as I was finishing the project. And it was released, like I said, right before the holidays. But one that question, I looked at it as a challenge, and the overall view of it all is that if this one man thinks or believes that there was all the progress that we needed, how many other people are out there in the world that kind of feel the same way? And just as there are as many people that may feel like he did, there are others that defended my topic who also believe and know and can make people aware and educate, just like I'm trying to do with this book. So that has been the origin of why I came up with to lead or not to lead. In the book, I do talk a lot. Like I mentioned, I interviewed a variety of different people, those that are in leadership roles, those who have tried to gain leadership roles, but couldn't for whatever reason. Being a minority, and especially when you're African American or Latina or whatever it may be, when you are the minority, it can be tough because of lack of opportunities or mentorship and that sort of thing, which I do go into further, but I found in my research. And, I don't necessarily understand why, but it's interesting. And you may have even said in our last session, we're all human, but for whatever reason, we all don't get the same opportunities. And that's even in my own experiences going to Michigan State undergrad. You see all kinds of races, and I was used to being around people, and wasn't intimidated by that. But when I got to Michigan State, just an hour and a half away, when you think of it, got there, and you had people who had never seen Black people in person before. So there was a fear, by what they saw in the media or television or whatnot. And so that was like shocking for me. And even coming across professionals, the people that I'm looking up to kind of mentor me and kind of guide me, tell me that no, you can't be in my class because your kind usually don't pass this class. Or even just not really having anyone in my field that could really show me the best way of how I could become a successful writer, which I always knew I wanted to write. I just didn't know what I wanted to do with it. And then full circle, it comes back around and I'm writing books now and I'm teaching as well, which I never thought I would do at all. But it was just my own experience of having to go through that. And I did a lot of this by myself because I didn't have anyone that I can guide. So to guide me. So now what I try to do now is try to be that mentor to other people, speak up, serve. Also just show and be an example to show that you can accomplish this and this is how you can do it. So maybe their journey will be a little bit easier. Also, like I mentioned in the various roles that I did have to get me to this point, just witnessing the leadership, the stress that it had on other people, and talking to the women and the men that I included in the book, and their experiences, it just opened my eyes up as well to how hard it can be. Some have it easier than others. And again, it's not even just race, but this woman in general. And so, although there has been progress, steady progress, it's always a reminder of how much harder we have to work sometimes and how one little thing can set you back. And one key example of that is the administration that we're under now. I hope I'm not offending any. Oh, it was like one person said last session, you take one step forward and it's two steps back. And so when I ask myself that question, that's kind of how I feel about it, that there is progress, but there's always a reminder that we still have so much work to do. But it's always a good thing when you have people coming together like you all are doing here and we're doing today, just to educate, inform, and kind of make a difference together. And so, I've had some people after reading the book, because it's really a quick read, and I wasn't expecting this, people who may not be college educated like I am, different walks of life come up and say, well, hey, you know what? I went through that same experience that you mentioned. I had a prison guard come up and tell me that. And I would have never thought about it, him being a prison guard, but, trying to, climb the ladder, break through that glass ceiling to become more. He was like, I think all of us have gone through that situation. So it's had a bigger impact than what I can, even imagine. But it just shows that we all have our stories that need to be shared. And this is, one topic or issue that more people need to be made aware of. So that's how To Lead or Not to Lead came about. And in promoting it, I do hope to do more engagements like this where I can further educate and inform and get other people on board to, get the message across to that, equality, we're all the same. We all need to work together and we could change things. I feel like I'm talking to, not too long, but okay, well, I really don't have anything else to say. But I was going to ask, is this a time to ask if anyone has questions, or that comes later? Okay, please, feedback, anyone. If anyone has anything to say, help me out. Oh, over here first and then back over here. Mhm. At first he was hesitant. It was like he had made up his mind about it, and more. But the more and more people kept jumping on board, adding, their own stories, and then, like I mentioned, it was people that were, white. Women, even other white men that tried to get him to see it. And I don't believe that he left there convinced. So I don't know. Yeah. I did actually, because my focus was initially on Michigan and the people I interviewed. So it is Michigan responses. And with my own stories, I covered Muskegon as well, because my struggles, like, not only just in school and then graduating, but coming back to try to find a job and then finding one, that was related to my degree or that paid because I had a degree. That was a struggle in itself. And then, finally landing that probably about after a year and a half, but being the only minority woman. It was another one. And what I end up learning, and I talk about it in my book too, we were hired to start the same day. I will find out like 3 years later, because I lasted there for about 3 years, that there was this, they were pushed or forced to add diversity. So that's why they brought two of us in. And we were in the front on display. I never thought about it during the time because, I'm young, fresh out of college, just trying to get started. But it was just certain things that I look back now. For instance, like our president, every time she would introduce me, like I was the one that worked, I was the one with the degree. So I worked in the grant department, but I also was an administrative assistant. Every time I would get introduced to donors, it was always, this is Shanika, and guess what? She went to Michigan State, and she's just from Muskegon Heights. Now, that introduction, when she first said that, I kind of like blew it off, but it would continue to be the introduction. So it was just kind of like me having to adjust again to someone, I guess, that had never really been around another African American and not necessarily knowing what is not appropriate to say, or not sensitive to the fact of how that could be interpreted. So just those experiences of actually being in the workplace, a lot of it started in Muskegon Heights. And then I ended up getting like my dream job, which ended up not being my dream job, and moving to Grand Rapids, which I actually absolutely loved. I was there for like 11 years, just for my age and just socially and professionally. I loved it. But what I noticed there, I would hear people say all the time, like other minorities, because in Grand Rapids, there's so much networking events and things that you can do there that Muskegon didn't have at that time. Just hearing other people complain about their experiences that they've had, it took me a whole lot longer to see that it was evident in the bigger city. I think because Muskegon is so much smaller, I was able to see it immediately in comparison to being in Grand Rapids. And to tell you the truth, it wasn't until 10 years into my time there and working for the state, under different leadership, that I did see it. People just treating you differently because of your skin color or not wanting you to climb the ladder. So it just taught me a whole lot, how I mentioned that whole mentorship piece. And me discovering that some people just don't really want you to succeed because of how you look, which is unfortunate, but it is out there. So yeah, my book mostly covers the Michigan experience for us. Yes, sir.
What types of businesses are better at putting minorities in leadership positions?
I honestly, like I mentioned, working for the state, that was the most that I had seen with minority leadership. And this included black men, women, um, Mexican men. I remember there were a couple. It was the most that I had ever seen. So it seemed like maybe government. And from what I understand, and I don't know how true this is, Michigan has like the highest paying um, salaries or whatever for government in comparison to others. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it either, but I noticed that that was the most representation that I had seen in my career working. In the other instances, it was always just one or two of us, although it may be a female, white female in leadership in many cases, but I would say the government probably will hire the most from what I saw. And I don't know if that's still the case now, but anyone can confirm or have anything to say about that? Okay. Okay, yeah, military, that's a good example.
I'm
Yes,
not
sir.
sure how to handle this, but I'll just say it.
Hmm.
I was in engineering in California, and we had on federal, I think even state jobs, what they call MBE and WBE, minority women business. But I had a really good friend that was Japanese, and he refused to be to take a job where he used that criteria. I think it was 10% of the value. And my question, I always admired him for that because he said if they can't hire me based on my qualifications, I don't want the job.
Hmm.
Now, is that a I don't know, a negative, a positive trait, a negative, or something? That same guy was interned.
Oh, okay.
But I
And,
guess the question is, does it have any residual effect? You know, is there any kind of a, in my case, and I knew him pretty well. I respected it.
mm-hmm.
Now, others might say, "Oh, you only got the job because of that,"
Right.
and you weren't qualified.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do get what you said. And you know, that is very I respect that as well. And then just from what you guys described, it sounds like his experience made him have that respect for himself. But I'll be honest too, when I started noticing like the challenges of being the minority, and you know, like when I learned that I was hired because they were forced to bring diversity, I had to question myself about that too. And at that time, because I was young and I was just trying to, you know, get my foot in the door and do something, I didn't have a problem with that per se. I was like, if that's the way that we have to get in our feet, you know, in the door, looking at affirmative action and all of that, I'm willing to do that, because then what I can do once I'm in there, I could keep moving up and make more opportunities available for others like me. You know, that was my thought process in it all.
Well, and also you proved your case.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you
Exactly.
were given the opportunity, but
Mm-hmm.
then you have to make the best of the
All
opportunity.
right, you get the chance to show that you definitely have the
And there's a lot of
qualifications.
pressure on suggesting on that. If
Mm-hmm.
you screw up, you're really screwing up for a lot of people.
Exactly. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And I never thought of it like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Very good point. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm getting a. Thank you.